And that's what happens. I mean, I took a major Chevrolet dealership out in Long Island, New York, because the fellow that owned it was a degenerate gambler, got in trouble with my bookmakers. And my bookmakers would come to me and say, "Hey, Mike, this guy's into us really deep. Should we cut him off?" And I said, "Why would you cut him off?" I said, "You're only writing an entry on a piece of paper. And he's losing. Let him lose $500,000, $1 million, then let him come to me." And he did, and I took over his agency because he had to pay me.
Hi, and welcome. It's Runchuks, and you're listening to my podcast where I explore the topics around what it takes to become a great poker player with various interesting people from in and around poker industry. If you're enjoying the podcast, you might be interested to sign up to my weekly newsletter where I deliver my key takeaways and ideas from each latest episode. Go look it up on runchukspodcast.com. Today, I'm talking to Michael Franzese. He was a high-ranking member of Colombo crime family in New York. Fortune magazine named Michael as one of the top 50 most wealthy and powerful mafia bosses. And he was briefly mentioned in one of my favorite movies, The Goodfellas. But more importantly, he is one of very few people of his caliber who managed to quit that life and survive to tell the story. Today, among other things, we talk about the ways that people from organized crime take advantage of inexperienced and naive civilians who do business with them. But the message here is broader. In poker business, integrity is very important. And crossing the line always has consequences. It doesn't matter much if you cross that line together with mobsters or just with your high school friends. There's always a price to pay. It's just that when you deal with people like Michael's ex-colleagues, the price tends to be steeper. And now, I hope you enjoy our conversation. Welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you on, and perhaps you could introduce yourself because, the way you do it, I can't do it for you.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on. And for those of you that don't know me, I was a former member of organized crime. I was a made member in the Colombo family, one of the 5 New York La Cosa Nostra Mafia families. And I grew up in that life. My dad before me was the underboss of the family, a very powerful position, second in command under the boss. And so I kind of grew up in that life, but initially wasn't destined to be part of it. I was actually going to school to be a doctor. I was an athlete in school, and my dad wanted me on a different course. But he got in some severe trouble. He was very high profile at that time, always a major target of law enforcement. And eventually he drew a 50-year prison sentence in federal court for masterminding a nationwide string of bank robberies. A charge that until today, I know that was false. I know my dad was never a bank robber. So he went into prison, and I love my dad very much. So I was determined to try to help him and get him out of that prison sentence. Joe Colombo was the boss of our family at that time. He kind of took me under his wing. I would start to meet a lot of my dad's friends. And, they said, "Mike, what are you doing going to school? If you don't help your father out, he's going to die in prison." As a result of that, I visited my father in Leavenworth Penitentiary in Kansas, told him I wasn't going to school. I had to help him out, or he'd basically die in prison. And it was at that point in time that he redirected me to become a member of his life because he thought that would be the best way for me to help him out. And so in 1975, after an initial period that I had to prove myself worthy, I became a made member, took the oath, and started that life in 1975. I was fortunate. I knew how to use that life to benefit me in business. I did end up getting my father out on parole after 10 years, even though he kept going back into prison. Did a total of 40 years in prison throughout that time out of the 50. Kept going back every time he was released on parole. He was violated and go back. But, I started my kind of rise in that life. In 1980, I was appointed a captain, capo regime, and, made a significant amount of money and kind of rose in the ranks until 1985, when I met a young girl who is now my wife of 35 years, and decided because of what was going on in that life, the Racketeering Act had come into play. A lot of my friends were going to jail for a long time. I had become a major target myself. I was indicted 5 times. I had 2 federal racketeering cases. And I decided on my last case to take a plea, do some prison time, give the government some restitution, and after my prison sentence, I would try to make a break from that life. Which I was released finally after doing 8 years in prison in 1995, and since then I've been, able to, under some very trying circumstances and a lot of struggles and challenges, because you're not allowed to walk away from that life. But I did, and here I am today, some 24 years later, and I've been very, very fortunate, very blessed, in my opinion, to be able to have a family and a career, and just moved on with my life. So basically, that's it.
Right.
It's a long story. I wrote a couple of books. There's a lot of documentaries out there about me, but that's kind of the summary.
Indeed, yeah, and like you said, there's a lot of information about you, and it's incredible that you walked away from the life that not many people can walk away, and become this public figure, a speaker, an inspirational person. What you didn't mention in your short summary is that you've been mentioned in a Fortune magazine in top
Yes.
50 all-time mob earners. You were number 18. And the incredible part about it, you were 35 years old when you were listed as number 18 of all-time earners. The success that you had in that world was incredible. And to walk away and do what you do right now is just such a unique story, and such a unlikely story, to be honest, because I heard you say that some of the people that found out about you walking away, some of the people from the government agencies, they basically said, yeah, well, he's a dead man walking, and that's not going to happen. What I want to talk about, because you mentioned your father, right? And in one of the interviews that you did, you said that when you were growing up, your father never talked about the life with you. He was true to the oath he took, so he wasn't sharing the details about the life, and that included not sharing the details with you. Is that unusual?
Well, it's what you're supposed to do when you take that oath. It's an oath of omerta, which means silence. You're not allowed to share the secrets of that life with anyone else. And if my dad was anything, he was a good soldier in that regard. He was an old timer, and he never acknowledged that he was part of that life, and he never gave me the details prior to my becoming a member. So, he never wanted to bring what was going on in the outside, in his world rather, into the home. We were a family in the home. And although we grew up differently, because my dad being a major target of law enforcement, he was always under surveillance. From the time I was born, practically, I remember my dad being under surveillance and law enforcement around, and him getting arrested several times. And we lived with that. So I knew there was definitely something different with my dad, obviously, but he never talked about it. Never.
Right. There's one thing about this relationship with your father, because I feel like he's an inspirational figure to you. You fondly talk about your father over and over again. And there was an episode where you were basically walking into a room led by a friend, which you might have felt like, well, this is it. You're walking to get whacked, because there was, if I remember correctly, there was a newspaper article claiming that you're making $2 billion or something like that, and the mob got suspicious, because in fact you were making $8 million a week, which is an incredible number. But they read a newspaper article, you walked in, and your father didn't defend you in a way. And that was an episode which sort of helped you make the mind that it's time to get away from the life. Is that accurate?
It is. And just to be clear, I had devised a scheme to defraud the government out of tax on every gallon of gasoline. And I ran that operation for about 8 years. I had a lot of the Russian mob guys as my partners. And we collectively were bringing in $5 to $8 million a week. It wasn't all going into my pocket. I want to make that clear. But we had a very lucrative operation at that time. And yeah, one of the low points in that life, I would say, is that, money and power mean a lot. And if you're making a lot of money and you're starting to become powerful, people at the top start to be concerned. And, one of the real horrors about that life is that, you make a mistake, your best friend walks you into a room, you think everything's okay. You walk in that room, you don't walk out again. And obviously, as an official in that life, I've experienced that with others. And I got that walk one night, and it was a very scary situation. I'll be honest with you. I was very concerned with the setup as I was walking into that room. And it's true. My dad, he went into that room before me, and he might have even been part of this setup to find out how much money I was really making, because the newspapers were blowing it out, even though I was paying a lot of money to the family as I was supposed to. But yeah, it was scary, and my dad didn't defend me properly that night, and it had a real impact on me. And I believe that if that didn't happen that night, and I didn't see that betrayal in a way from my father, I don't know if I would have ever walked away from the life. But it really impacted me, to the point where I said, "Hey, if this life can separate father and son, because he and I were so close, what do we really have here?" And, it wasn't until 2 years later that I made the decision to walk away. But that played a primary role in that, yes.
Mm. And I wanted to bring up this story because, as you said, if this life can separate father and son, you can only imagine what it does to friends, what it does to business colleagues. Because in the same business operation that you were running, one of your closest partners in the oil business was basically collecting evidence against you throughout the years. It was like his get out of jail free card, right? So this backstabbing, this betrayal is very much part of the life. And as you said, well, power is what everybody's after. And, well, the ethics of the thing is somewhat different to the civilian world. And is my prime concern, the reason I wanted to talk to you, well, apart from, I'm just a big fan of the work that you're doing and all your stories. And I think it's great that you share it and people need to hear it. But especially for my audience, for the poker players, many of whom get into the business of playing poker professionally are just young guys with no experience in life. Especially for those who get into playing live games, they might encounter situations where, well, they get to meet people like you, people who, well, not like you right now, but people from your former life, for whom gambling is a huge part of business. And it's important to give this cautionary tale of what can happen, because even if we think, like, I know you do a lot of work for NBA, for example, and educate the coaches, the referees, and the players about the dangers of gambling and how Mafia takes advantage of the people who gamble. Can you expand a bit on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's actually how I started speaking. In the last 6 months of my prison sentence, I was visited by all the pro sports, well, the NBA and Major League Baseball, to be exact. And they asked me to participate in a video, an anti-gambling video, because they realized and knew that gambling among their players and personnel was a big problem in the leagues. And so I agreed to do that. And because on the street, I had a number of bookmakers, illegal gamblers, that worked under me. And we had a lot of sports figures and league personnel that were gambling with us. Yeah, it's a big part of that life. Gambling is a mainstay in that life. So we had a lot of, league personnel, players gambling with us. So they asked me to educate the players as to some of the problems they can encounter dealing with people like us or just gambling in general. So that's how I started speaking because I created that video with them. And then when I got out of prison, they asked me to come to speak to the players. And I've been doing that for 24 years on the pro and college level. And, it's a problem. I mean, organized crime is very much involved in gambling, and all they care about is just getting an edge and making money. And they'll use people in that life to achieve those goals. So it's something I'm intimately familiar with. I'm not a real poker player, I'll be honest with you with that, but I've had gamblers around me, all my life. And I realize that they're very susceptible because gambling could be a real sickness if you don't know how to control it and you don't do it the right way. It's like a drug. And, so I've done my best to educate people over the years, and it's obviously a good program because I've been doing it for 24 years and they keep calling me back. So I've spoken at probably 350 universities, Division I and Division II, to all the athletes. And I've spoken on a pro level to most of the leagues and many of the players and umpires and league personnel. So it's important, and I feel committed to it. And look, I tell people gambling itself is not a terrible thing. It's like anything else. It's how you control it, how you watch the people around you, who you get involved with, make sure nobody's trying to use you, and just act on it the right way.
Yeah, it's the key point you mentioned. That make sure nobody's trying to use you, because in poker world, among professionals, and I'm just going to zoom in on the professionals, not talk about the recreational players all that much. But among professionals, it's quite common to be quite relaxed about how the money changes hands. It's not uncommon to just receive a text message from your friend and say, hey, listen, another guy you never saw him is just going to come over to your table and he needs a big sum of money he needs to buy into the tournament. Can you give it to him? Right. And, everything happens on like a text message basis. Word of mouth, like reputation is a big thing. So obviously tarnishing the reputation is close to the end of the career. So most people are really relaxed about it. And they do the same when they deal with people outside of the poker professional industry. And some of them might get in trouble for this, because the ways that people from your former life take advantage of that are so ingenious of, lending the money easily. Sure, you pay it back later. Sure, you do this. But what happens after? Not many people understand, like, what it means to be in debt to the wrong people. When you talk to the athletes, like, what is the story that you tell them? What is the cautionary tale here?
Well, in an athlete's position, they're always a target, because remember, when it comes to sports competitions on that level, it's never about winning or losing the game. It's always about the point spread. Mm-hmm. So if you can manipulate the point spread by having a principal player on your side, or a referee or an umpire on your side, over the course of a number of games, you can make a lot of money. The problem for the player at that point is once they agree to do something like that, especially with a member of organized crime, they've compromised themselves in a big way, in a really big way. And that's what I've told them. You got to be very careful of the people you associate with. You got to understand that people are trying to use you. They're trying to, get an edge in this competition. And they may offer you things, whether it be money or women or certain things in your lifestyle that you would appreciate to get close to you. But basically, they're trying to use you. And once you get involved with something like that, well, you're open to a big problem, because at any point in time, it can threaten you. Hey, we're going to let people know what you've been doing for the past couple of games, and so on and so forth. So, I always tell them, anybody that's trying to give you something for nothing, be careful. You got to be on your guard. You got to do your research. You got to grow up. I tell the athletes, you're in a man's world now. This is not a kid's world anymore. And just be very, very aware of who is around you, questions that they might be asking you, for what purpose, for what reason. Information is the lifeblood of gambling on sports. medical information, information about personalities in the clubhouse. There's so many things impact what could happen in a competition that can manipulate the point spread. So, be guarded in who you give information to. You're not supposed to give it out anyway, but you just got to be careful. And the problem with organized crime, at least in my life of organized crime, is that we knew, it was our expertise how to get friendly, how to get close, how to get into somebody. We knew how to put our arm around you, make you feel comfortable, make you feel important. And before you know it, you're in a trap, you're in a snare. So we were masters at that. It's not always by force that you have to do something. It's by manipulation. It's by getting close to somebody. So, they had to be wary of that. And I tell them when it comes to gambling, it doesn't have to be a member of organized crime. It could be anybody. Someone with a gambling habit. I don't want to say an addiction, but a gambling habit that's really into their gambling life. You got to be very careful with these people because they know how to manipulate and know how to use you. And, so it's basically teaching these athletes how to be on their guard 24/7. And that's what it takes.
All right. When you're tempted, like let's say if we talk about an athlete or a poker player, when you're tempted to do something that is risky, what is there to stop you? Right? It's risky, but you see the huge upside. Why not take the step?
Well, listen, a lot of us are risk takers. And as you get older, you learn how to minimize the risks because you've been through it. When you're younger, sometimes you have to go through it to learn. The problem is when you go through it, the consequences can be so severe that could be the end of your career or could cause you major problems. You don't need to go through that. I think it's something within you. Education is important. If you don't know that you're susceptible to somebody trying to compromise you, well, then you don't know you have a problem. So education is important. People have to be aware of this. And then it's your inner self. Say, look, do I value what I'm doing now? Do I want to keep it this way? Or do I want to take a chance for a few extra bucks I can make, It's something within you that you have to be strong enough to resist when there's a temptation that could lead you in the wrong direction.
Right. Well, most of the business that Mafia gets in the legitimate side, it's mostly people approaching you and saying, hey, I have this business idea. I can't get the money from the bank. Can I deal with you? That's pretty much governed by greed and just looking at the upside. How do you reflect on those people? The people who go and want to do business with the organized crime?
Well, yeah, what you said is very important. The movies most of the time get it wrong. They make it seem like, a bunch of organized crime guys scheme to get involved in a major company and they walk in there in pinstripe suits with guns and they take it over. It doesn't happen that way. In my case, especially, and I can speak for most of my former associates, it was somebody from inside a company that wants to make a few extra bucks, that knows maybe there's a way to compromise the business that they're in. And they come to us for help, whether it be for money, whether it be for protection, whether it be to help them, carry through a scheme that they may have in mind. That happened to me so many times, so often. As a matter of fact, businessmen would approach me so much. I used to have a place on a Monday night where if you had something you wanted to talk to me about, I'm there every Monday night, come and talk to me. And you'd be surprised how many people in business have come to me. So it's always somebody from the inside that figures out a way or wants to do something to make their lifestyle better. And, again, you have to be aware of this. And, we were very good. People would come to us, how much money you need? They couldn't get it from a bank. We'll give you whatever money you want. Take it. You pay us X amount of dollars a week. And if you can't pay it, well, we're going to take control of your company. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens. I mean, I took a major Chevrolet dealership out in Long Island, New York, because the fellow that owned it was a degenerate gambler, got in trouble with my bookmakers. And my bookmakers would come to me and say, hey, Mike, this guy's into us really deep. Should we cut him off? And I said, why would you cut him off? I said, you're only writing an entry on a piece of paper. And he's losing. Let him lose $500,000, $1 million, then let him come to me. And he did. And I took over his agency because he had to pay me. I tell people, when you have a gambling debt, you're going to pay the debt. In Vegas, you write a marker and you don't pay. It's like writing a bad check. I mean, you're going to pay your gambling debt, whether it be on the street or whether it be in illegal gambling. But you're going to pay somehow, some way. So you deal with organized crime, and you're probably going to pay in the worst way possible. You're going to take a big loss. So, it's again, you have to weigh your options and say, is it worth taking the risk? Am I going to be able to do this? Money is always a strong, aphrodisiac to people. Oh, if I have X amount of dollars, I can make X amount more. I know that for a fact. I mean, I lent a lot of money to card players. I had card games that people under me would operate. Guys are always coming to me for money all the time. And I made money off of them because they kept coming back to play. They would lose. They'd either lose at my table. I know a lot of times guys would lose at my table, go to the game down the street, lose there. It's robbing Peter to pay Paul. Gambling is a tough thing, and you got to be able to control it. I would imagine even on a professional level, you got to be able to control it. It's like anything else. It's something very interesting. I recently saw the documentary on Michael Jordan. And, they asked Michael, it's legendary. Michael's a big gambler. He gambles on everything. And they asked Michael if he had a gambling problem. And Michael said, no, I don't have a gambling problem. I have a competition problem. And, it struck me. He's absolutely right. Because losing money doesn't compromise his lifestyle at all. Because he's got enough. The secret is to have enough to cover your losses all the time. Then you can do whatever you want. Cover your losses all the time. You can do whatever you want. So I agree with Michael. He didn't have a gambling problem because it didn't hurt his lifestyle at all. He didn't make it impact his life. But he has a competition problem. And gambling just raises the level of competition on anything that he's doing, whether he's playing sports or anything else. It raises the level of competition. And I noticed that a lot of gamblers have that kind of competitive spirit. They want to just keep coming back. It's the competition. It's, I'm going to beat you. A lot of times, not even the money. And, you could speak to that better than I can. But I've noticed this in many people that I've been involved with that gamble throughout their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. This competitive drive is one part that's necessary in the equation of becoming better, striving to become better than the competition. But it can lead to demise of a lot of people as well when when it gets out of the control. And speaking of Michael Jordan, what about the rumors that he was asked to step away from NBA for a couple of years because his father was allegedly killed because of Michael's debts? Do you know anything about that?
I only know what I've heard, and I think what I heard at the time wasn't right. But there were rumors going around. This was after his father was killed, and I was working with the NBA, that it might have had something to do with Michael's gambling problem. I think that's been debunked. I don't think that's the case. But I am pretty certain, because I heard it from good sources back then, that he was asked to step away from the NBA just to let things silence. And Michael, being the competitor that he is, went and played baseball. Now, he may deny that, and he may be right. I'm only telling you what I heard at the time from people that I considered to be good sources. They might have been speculating. They might have known something. Maybe Michael doesn't want to come out with it. It doesn't matter at this point. But I don't believe that his dad's death had anything to do with his gambling problem. I think that's been debunked.
Yeah. All right. Let's get back to what we previously discussed, the competitive drive. And actually, let's go back even further, right? People approaching organized crime and saying, hey, I want to do business with you. Once you get in business with people from organized crime, you're basically on the hook. You can't get out easily, even if you're making money. Obviously, while you're making money, everybody's going to be happy, but it's only as long as you're making money. With poker players, or with anyone really, there comes a time when you have a temptation to do something that is not ethical. So crossing some sort of imaginary line. And I see we recently had some scandals in the poker industry where people clearly crossed the line because they thought, well, first of all, seems like everybody's doing it, which is not the case at all. But first of all, that. And second, well, what's the downside? If I get caught, nothing's going to happen, right? It's not like police is going to get involved, etc., etc. That I feel that happens a lot. And this greed drives people to make these sort of decisions. From your experience, like, what would you say to somebody who wants to cross this line and sees only the upside and thinks that downside is not there?
Well, listen, it's like I can compare it to what happened in Major League Baseball during the steroid era. Why were they all doing it? Well, everybody was doing it. That's what everybody said. Everybody's doing it. So what are they going to do? Catch everybody? And everybody was doing it until what happened? Everybody started to get caught. And then careers were ruined. The industry had a big black guy. You're always going to get caught if you stay in something long enough. You're always going to get caught if you share information with someone else. Look, the downfall of my former life was really it started to cave in from within. A lot of guys became informants because the government started to wield more power than the mob did when they came out with these racketeering laws and the Bail Reform Act and the Sentencing Reform Act. What happened in my former life is that fear of the mob for retribution for making a mistake it was transferred to the government because the government became more powerful in the kind of sentences they were giving, and people didn't want to spend the rest of their life in jail. So it's the same thing. And anytime you take a risk, okay, if you're sharing that with others, if other people know what you're doing, if more people get involved in it, it's only a matter of time before it's going to explode. And are you going to be one of the casualties, or are you going to be one of the fortunate ones that come out okay? I was one of the casualties. I did 8 years in prison. I had a $15 million restitution. I lost a lot. I had $5 million in forfeitures and so on. But I ended up, after a long stretch of very difficult times, being okay. But who wants to go through that? So the bottom line is, you really have to weigh your options and and look at what the consequences of your actions can be down the line. Everything looks great at that moment. I'll make a few extra bucks. Everybody's doing it. What's the big deal? What's going to happen? But life is very funny. You can't always predict the future. And if you're putting yourself in the fire, you got to prepare to get burned. And that's just the way it goes. I've seen it happen so many times. I've heard people say the same, everybody was doing it at the time. Yeah, now look what's happening to everybody. You have to resist it.
Mm-hmm. And also, if we think about doing something just for the money, it's probably a bad idea. I mean, when is enough enough? If your only goal is money, you're probably never reaching a point of satisfaction. You're never reaching a happy life. Because let's face it, let's say in the time when you were making 8 million with other people a week, right? So I would assume you personally were quite well off. Would you say you're happier now because you found a new purpose, a purpose that actually allows you to share something with others?
There's no question. Look, I mean, I had my own jet plane. I had a helicopter. I had houses in 3 different states. I had boats in the water behind my house. But I just kept wanting to make more money. I don't know why. I was never able to use all the money that I made, but I wanted to continue to make more money. I wanted to acquire things, obtain things, not even that I was going to use them, but just to have them. Eventually, it was my downfall because I was doing a lot of it illegally. Now, don't get me wrong. Look, money is important. Money, the best thing money does for you, in my opinion, is gives you comfort and peace of mind. I'm comfortable now. I have the money that I need. I'm not looking to buy the state of California. I'm not looking to do all these different things. But if I want to go on vacation, I can. If I want to buy a car, I can. I live in a nice house in a decent neighborhood. So, those are the things that are important to me, and I can enjoy my life. So when you reach that point, why do you always want more? it comes a time, and I guess sometimes it comes with age. Sometimes, you just very fortunate to have that at a young age. Hey, I got enough. I live comfortably, and this is all I need. But money, look, my dad always told me, and he was so right. He said, you got to watch out for really three things in life. He missed one, but he said three things: wine, women, and money. He says those three things can take you down faster than anything else. He left one thing out that I learned later on, and that's power. A lust for power is very, very dangerous in this life. It causes you to do a lot of bad things. I've seen family turn against family for power. Very bad things. So if you can learn to control those things, wine, women, money, and the fourth being power, you could live a good life.
That's really powerful. But coming back to you saying you were making so much money and your drive was to keep making more and more money, isn't it so that it's pretty hard for you to step down? Let's say when you're making all that money with the other people involved in organized crime, it's a pretty tough conversation to have with your business partners, telling them, hey, listen, you know what, I want to slow it down a bit. I want to, maybe we're making too much money. That's unlikely to go well with your business partners. So you're sort of stuck. Even if you wouldn't want to, there's no easy way out, right?
Well, that's correct. And, one of the reasons my boss and people were so upset with me, because when I left, the faucet turned off in a big way and the money wasn't coming in the same. And people were upset with that. But, look, you got to know when to call it quits. But, I'll tell you how I rationalized at that time. I had the government on my back all the time. I mean, I had a task force comprised of 15 or 16 different law enforcement agencies that their specific job was to put me away for life. So, I mean, I had those challenges every day. But do I say, okay, I'm going to throw in the towel? But my reasoning was, well, listen, you get as much time for $1 million as you do for $10 billion. So why should I stop? If I stop this, that money's going somewhere else. So I may as well keep going, achieve and obtain as much as I can. That's how I reasoned at the time. And it wasn't a bad rationalization because I was already in the fire. There was no way I was getting away from the government. They were going to get me one way or the other. And so, I had to, to get into what I had to do to end up where I am now is another, I could write a whole book about that, but it's a long story. And it was a lot of good fortune on my part, a lot of planning, a lot of strategy, and a lot of things just broke my way to have me be where I am today. Trust me, I couldn't have planned this all the way. It's just things started to break my way. But, you have to know when enough is enough. And that's hard for people, very, very hard. Because you say, hey, you know what? Why can't I just keep going? I'm making a lot of money now. Why can't I keep doing this? I'm never going to get caught. Or this isn't enough. Or what if I want to buy something else? And, it's, and that's the world we live in because we see it around us all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the problems with crossing the line. Once you cross the line and you're dealing with other people behind that line, once again, it's a hard conversation to say, hey, guys, I want out. They won't let you.
No,
even in the smaller things. I'm just thinking about some of the scandals that happened in the poker world, right? You can't get out. So you think you're doing it for a week, you're doing it for a month. Well, you're a fool. They won't let you.
Well, if you're fortunate enough to have the talent, the ingenuity to survive and prosper in that world, the world that you're in, you should, your benefit is to have that strategy and that talent. Why poison it by bringing something into that could compromise you in such a way? And that's a message I give an athlete. Your talent got you here, your ability. Why are you going to compromise that by bringing some outside force in here that eventually can have an advantage over you, something to hold over your head? The best thing in this world is not to owe anybody anything. And if you've gotten someplace on hard work, talent, ingenuity, that's it. I mean, you don't need anybody else to come in and try to compromise what you've worked hard for.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, look, poker is, there's a lot that goes into it. I know. I mean, I've played and I've watched. I'm not a great poker player. I don't have I don't know. I don't have the desire for it, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like to lose money. That's it. But, why compromise it with somebody coming in and having the arm on you, having an advantage over you, having something to say about you? You don't need that.
Absolutely. And that's such a powerful message to remind people that, if you're there on merit, if you're there on talent, if you're there on your hard work, making a compromise with your principles or just having bad principles in life to begin with, that's going to tarnish the whole thing for you. The longevity is not going to be there, and you will either be stuck doing something that you don't want to do because, well, you owe somebody something. You owe them a favor and you can't get out. So, yeah, like
Absolutely.
You
said. I tell you, I've seen it happen so often. When people have a competitive spirit, they're normally an easy target, especially the younger people. They're easy targets because they don't have that experience. They don't have that know-how, and their talent and their competitive. And instead of being an advantage to them, it turns into a disadvantage. And that's what you have to be careful of. Your talent, your ability, your competitive nature has to always be used to your advantage and not become a disadvantage to you. And, that's a problem with athletes. Mm-hmm. They make their competitiveness become a disadvantage by getting around the wrong people and wanting more than what their talent will bring them.
Right. And another aspect here is that, with this competitive drive and with this risk-taking mentality, many people sort of make reckless decisions because it's going to work out.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because, you have to weigh things before recently I had a conversation on a podcast with a young guy, wonderful story. And I mean, everything ended up great. And it's a great tale. But at the same time, he made some decisions which were clearly, why are you doing it? Why are you basically risking your life just because you already came to a point that's easier to keep going forward than to turn back? And that's the problem with being competitive and being a risk taker. You're going to have to face a lot of these decisions and you might just keep plowing on.
Yeah, something you said, but I heard a lot of people, well, I just thought it was going to work out. And I said, you didn't think it was going to work out. You were hopeful that it was going to work out. But you didn't really weigh, the reason why it would work out. Because most of the time it won't. You just don't want to hear that. You don't want to listen to that in your head. Because what's in front of you becomes, more tantalizing, so to speak. I'll take the shot. But basically, you're just taking a risk. You don't know how it's going to work out. You're just hopeful that it works out. And oftentimes it doesn't. And then you pay the consequences. Too late at that point.
Right. One thing I want to talk about is the life of the organized crime. To many guys, it is appealing because of the power, because of all of the things. And like you said, education is important because, well, it's appealing if you don't know the details. If you only see the surface, seems all right. If you don't watch the movie till the end, the beginning of every gangster movie is usually pretty awesome. By the end, everybody dies. And that's pretty much the same in real life. People end up in jail, people end up dead. There are not many guys like you who walked away and can be a public speaker, can walk on a street, can eat in a restaurant without having to look over your shoulder all of the time.
Well, you said it. It's a message. I speak to a lot of young people, a lot of gangbangers. I go into a lot of juvenile halls and work in that area quite a bit. And young people, they'll say to me all the time, yeah, but you had all the money, you had the power, you had the great cars, you had the women, and they'll mention a movie. And I'll always say to them, well, did you watch the movie all the way through to the end? Who lost the car, the woman, their life, went to prison? How come they don't see that? They're not thinking to that point because all they see is what's in front of them. I have a chance to make this kind of money, have this kind of power, and that's all they see. Because they don't want to tell themselves that the bad stuff is going to happen. But 98% of the time, it will. Look, I'm the exception. I'm not the rule. And I can't sit here and tell you why it happened this way. I just, I'm very fortunate, very blessed that it happened this way. But I am certainly the exception. I don't know of anyone else that achieved the position in that life that I did, was able to walk away, not enter a witness protection program, not put anybody in prison. I'll be honest with you. I spoke to the government, but, honestly, I'm one of the talents that I have is I know how to strategize and read people and get myself in and out of situations. Now, I had a plan in speaking to the government, but knew it would never end up in me putting anybody in prison. My way was, okay, I'm trying to preserve my life for me and my family. So I'll talk to them a little bit, but I'm never going to go the distance. And whatever I tell them is never going to be used to put anybody in prison. So in a way, I don't like to say it because I don't want to sound like, but I outsmarted them a little bit. But I had some inside information, I had some knowledge, and I was able to use it. My experience and training in my former life taught me how to navigate that course. And so I was able to survive and be where I am today. It wasn't easy. I had a lot of challenges and a lot of struggles, and I went to prison as a result. But it's not easy to come out on the right side of these things. I don't know anybody in that, all my former associates are either dead or in prison for the rest of their life. All of them. I'm talking about all of them that had any kind of stature in that life. They're all gone. And in a period of 30 years, wiped out. So what does that tell you? The odds are pretty bad when you're trying to enter that life. Every gangbanger I know, the funny thing too, when you're in prison, I can't tell you how many times guys come up to me, I'm never coming back again because I learned in here what I have to do not to get caught. And I used to say, really? Who did you learn that from? Because everybody in here got caught. So how are they teaching you how not to get caught? I said, you're delusional. You're kidding yourself. Instead of thinking, okay, I got caught, I'm paying the consequences, let me go out and try to straighten my life out. They're already thinking how they're going to come back to jail. But they think it's never going to happen. It's crazy. I saw that so many times, and it was just, I just couldn't get it. Because I'm thinking, how do I stay away from this? I don't ever want to come back. I want to avoid it. It's this whole thing. I mean, I don't want to get political. It's this whole thing now. It's what I tell, you're never going to beat law enforcement over an extended period of time. You might get away once, you might get away twice. But if you keep in that game, you're going to go down. So the best way not to have a problem is to avoid it. Stay away from it. Don't go near it. You're not going to beat something. Stay away from it. And, it's even with these latest incidents that are happening. Look, what happened with the whole Floyd thing was absolutely a tragedy. But how many times are you going to have a confrontation with the police before it gets ugly? How many times? You got to say, I'm not going to beat these people. I went to jail once, twice, 3 times. I get caught, everything I do. Let me stay away because it's going to end up ugly. Those are the things that I don't understand, and I try to tell people. And it's the same thing in your sport. You may get away with something once or twice or 3 times, but if you keep putting your hand in the fire, you're eventually going to pay for it. So why do it? When you have a talent and an ability that has taken you this far and that can continue that way, okay, why compromise it?
Yeah, absolutely. And plus, it's not even a fair matchup, because people from your line of work, that's their thing, manipulating other guys, taking advantage of other guys. And like you were saying, you're gonna make this young kid comfortable and feel like he's on top of the world, best friends. Sure, join me for this nice restaurant, etc., etc. I'll give you everything you want. That's something that these guys from your line of work, your previous line of work are very good at. And what does this young guy know? Nothing. It's just, okay, well, Michael seems like an awesome guy. I like him.
Absolutely.
And then one day you get the reality check and you find out, okay, well, Michael tells me to do X. I'm going to have to do X. I can't get away.
You know, it's an example I used to tell, and I think you could apply it to your business, your sport. And I'd speak to college football players, and I'd always tell the coach, I want all your linemen right in the front row. Big guys, 300 pounds, 350, 6'5". And I'd get to a point. I lost you again. Hold on. There you are. I'd get to a point where I would tell the biggest guy in the room, stand up. He would look at me, look around. I said, stand up. What are you afraid of? You're 3 times my size. Stand up. You get up. And I said, you're a pretty big guy. Very strong. You work out every day. Take 3 people out every time you defend your quarterback. I said, if I ever got on the field with you, I wouldn't last 2 seconds. You'd eat me up. I said, but let me explain something to you this. And I draw a little line with my foot. I said, you come over this line, you come into my world, you're no match for me. I said, I'll eat you up and spit you out in 1 second. Because whatever I tell you I'm going to do, I'm going to do. And then I'm going to go home and eat dinner. I said, so don't step over that line. You're no match for me or any of my associates. And that guy would the whole room would get quiet and they would sit down. The point being, you're overmatched. No matter how smart you think you are, you come into our world, you're overmatched. Because this is our world. This is what we want to do. We don't care if we hurt you. We don't care. We'll achieve what we want to achieve. And you're just a tool that we're using. And we'll throw you away when we're done with you.
That's the thing. That's what you're good at. That's also one of the reasons that for so many people, it's hard to get away from it, even after prison, even after experiencing all the bad aspects, because it's almost, what else are you going to do? First of all, that's what you're good at. And second, well, it's pretty hard to find a legitimate job as an ex-con, especially in the United States. Well, it's not like, people are waiting for you in a regular office job. And that's a problem.
No doubt. No doubt. Look, so many people I know that, that became informants, went into witness protection program for a couple of years, had to change their whole lifestyle. They couldn't make it. It's not who I am. I don't know how to do this. I'm too far gone. I'm too much a part of that life. They've struggled big time. Can't make it, but it's very unfortunate.
Yeah. I always think about Joe Pistone, right? The guy who was Donnie Brasco, right? I've seen a couple interviews with him, and he seems, at least on surface, it seems like he was so deep in that life, and yet when the mission was over, he stepped away, he's back to normal. Have you seen any of his interviews?
I know Joe. Yeah, I've been in his company a few times.
Right.
Once or twice during my time in that life, because I knew Lefty pretty well. But I've seen him. As a matter of fact, he just texted me 2 days ago. He has his own podcast now. So
oh, right.
He asked me about it. Yeah.
Nice.
He's, look, people, call me all sorts of names for saying this, but he's a nice guy. Listen, I want to tell you how we looked at law enforcement back then. They had their job. We had our job. Our job was to beat you. Your job was to arrest us. We respected law enforcement. The only time we got upset is if they tried to frame us or they harassed our family. We said, look, we're not going to do that to your family. You get us the right way. Our job is to try to beat you. We're going to make money any way we can. Your job is to arrest us. So we get it. We're on opposite sides. Just play the game right. That's what we used to tell them. We play the game right because we're criminals. That's what we're supposed to do. You're supposed to be on the side of law enforcement, do it the right way. You got enough tools in your arsenal. Come and get us. And at that point in time, we respected them. So, I understand what Joe was doing. That was his lifestyle. That's what his job was. So, we became, we don't hang out together. I don't want to say that, but, we're friends now. I consider him a friend. So he's an interesting guy. But I'll tell you that to do what he did, if Joe and I were sitting together now and you didn't know either one of us, you'd be hard pressed to say which one was the mob guy.
Right.
Because he's so into that. Even now, he kind of acts the same way. It's funny. But what he did to go undercover like that and play that, I don't want to say game, but play that game for so long. I mean, he did a good job. I have to say it.
He did a great
Fooled a lot
job.
of people.
But what a sacrifice, though, for his family.
Tremendous
For
sacrifice.
it's incredible.
Tremendous sacrifice.
All right. Well, Michael, and speaking, because you mentioned Joe's podcast, I didn't know he has one. I'm definitely going to check it out. And I want to also, I'm going to put all the links in the show notes about the other podcast that you did. I really liked your interview with Patrick Bet-David.
Yeah.
That was great. And the recent one with Mike Tyson, that was very interesting as well. Definitely going to put all the links to that.
Great. I actually just did another one with Vlad TV. I don't know if you.
Oh yeah. I've seen that one as well. Yes, of course.
He just dropped. We did another one about a week ago, and he started to. He drops them in segments. So he dropped the first one yesterday.
Okay.
So it just came out.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely put the links and to your book as well. You see, I have a paper copy here. I read it. It's wonderful. I usually buy books as an ebook first, and if I like it, I buy a paper version. With yours, I just went straight to paper. I thought I want to have it. I want to have it at home, and you see, it's already. You've seen some action, and edges are.
That's good. I like to see books that way.
Yeah. And by the way, I saw you have the new YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, I actually just started it, and I'm going to be doing some. People are trying to get me to do a podcast, but I think I'd rather do YouTube right now because I have some things to say and to do. And we have a plan, and that'll start in another week or so that I'll start putting new content on there. There's some older content on there.
Okay.
But we have a plan along with my team as to how we're going to proceed on that, and it'll start next week. So we're excited about it. It's, during this pandemic, things that we weren't going to do before, we didn't have enough time for, we have time for now. So,
yeah. Well, yeah. I think podcasts and YouTube channels, etc., it's a growing business nowadays because more and more people discover that, hey, this is a good medium and it's a good time to start.
Absolutely.
Michael, thank you so much for your time. I know you have to go on with your day, and I really appreciate the time that you spent with me here. I think we covered some really interesting topics. Like I said, I'm going to put all the links to your stuff, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. Like you said, education is important because the story of the organized crime, the story of gambling debts, etc., it's nothing if you don't know the downside. If you don't watch the movie till the end, it's all pretty good in the beginning.
That's right. Got to watch it till the end. And the next time you visit Vegas once a year?
Well, yeah, not this year. Maybe later this year. But yeah, usually at least once a year I'm in Vegas.
Yeah, give me a holler because I go there quite a bit. And I have a show there. We had it for 6 months. It was called A Mob Story. It was downtown. But now we're moving up to the Strip in a place called the Mosaic Theater. And I'll be hosting the show every once in a while, but it's very enjoyable. It's the history of the mob in Las Vegas set to music and dance. And it's a cool show. Yeah, the reviews will be great on it, so you'll enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'll definitely reach out to you when I'm there.
You give me a call, you'll be my guest at the show. How's that?
Michael, that's amazing. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, and have a good day.
You too. And good luck. Keep doing the right thing.
Thank you. You too.
Right. Bye-bye now. I will. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you would like to get regular email from me where I share my key takeaways from each latest episode, go to runchukspodcast.com and subscribe to my newsletter. And of course, I would really appreciate if you subscribe to my channel on YouTube and rate my podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or any other platform where you normally listen to the podcasts. This really helps.